Okay, we'll start with the first 6 verses. I'll read those, then we'll talk about those. So, now the feast of the unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover. And the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people. Then Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. So he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he promised and sought opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. So the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, this is one of the, I guess, 3 big Jewish feasts that we know about. And this was instituted back in Exodus. So if you want to go back to Exodus chapter 12, Exodus chapter 12, verses 17 through 20, and a little bit before that as well, but verse 17 says, "So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this same day I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your houses, since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread." So that's where it was instituted, and it is a very important feast at this time. So they came together to do that. Verse 2 says, "The chief priests and the scribes sought how they might kill him, for they feared the people." Why do you think they feared the people?
Popularity. He's not only been teaching, but he's healed thousands of them.
Right.
So he's a pretty popular guy. We saw that on the entrance into the city.
Right.
And some of them are recognizing him as the Messiah. And Todd did the lesson the other day on Bartimaeus, and there's a reason why he calls him son of David.
Right.
That's a messianic inference. We believe you're the guy.
Right.
And they may have thought he was going to save them from the Roman government, but they still attribute him as being.
He was still a big deal. Yeah. Yeah, and so Mark was saying that, they feared due to the popularity of Jesus at this time, and that's definitely my thought as well. He was very well known. He had been teaching and preaching for quite some time. Lots of healing, lots of miracles. He was very well known. So they wanted to get rid of him, but they really couldn't do it without some sort of back channel method, for fear of them losing favor with the side of the people. It all comes down to popularity, doesn't it? And I wanted to read Matthew's record real quick. Matthew, I'm just going to turn back over to Matthew chapter 26. Yeah, Matthew 26, verses 3 through 5. It says, "Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, 'Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.'" So Matthew goes into a little bit more detail here, but the message obviously is the same. And he also adds the elders. So we have the chief priests, the scribes, the elders. This group we talk about quite a bit when it comes to Jesus. And again, with the high priest. And I think it's funny on verse 4, they plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. Because they had no other way of doing it. They had to figure something out. They had no grounds to do it. So they had to come up with something else. So verse 3 says, "Satan entered Judas, surnamed Iscariot, who was numbered among the 12. So when it says Satan entered Judas, what does this mean? Are we talking about a case of demonic possession here? What does that mean?
6 is going to give you clarity on that. The business of Judas allowing Satan.
Right. So right. Mark is saying that Judas allowed Satan to influence him. Do y'all agree? I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. If I go over to 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 through 9 says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world." So this is just the fact of Satan was looking for an inn, and he found it. That's really what this boils down to. Satan is opportunistic. We talk about this a lot. for whatever reason, Judas was the one that was weak enough for Satan to find his entry, and that's what they did. So this is not something where Judas's free will is taken away. This is something where Judas made the decision to do this. Yes, sir.
We battle this when we look at Exodus and
Mm-hmm.
God
Hardening,
hardening
yeah.
Pharaoh's heart.
Right.
And we think, well, it's not like he forced him to. Well, that balances nicely with what we've been studying in James 1. God doesn't tempt anybody to sin.
Right.
He's not capable of that. He's not going to do that. So it's a choice matter. That's why I say, it's important the way Luke's worded verse 6. Judas promised. Judas saw opportunity.
Correct.
And Satan will afford you and I opportunity. If that's the direction we want to go, he'll find a way
Yeah.
to give us an opportunity.
You will always have opportunity to sin. It's everywhere you look, and he Mark was mentioning that it's also about like that we have a problem sometimes with Exodus account of where where God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and again, it's not that he made Pharaoh do these things. This was the constant behavior of Pharaoh that led up to that. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Great point. I mean, Angel said we have to supposed to be guarding our hearts, and that's a fact. I mean, if you're not, I've said it all the time. Christianity is a verb; it takes action, and that's part of the action, right? You have to be always aware. The verses about how he roams about like a lion. I mean, that's some pretty big symbolism. I mean, anyone here want to get stalked by a lion? I mean, I don't, and that's what he does all the time, and he will find an opening if you allow that to happen. So verse 4 says, so he went his way and conferred with the chief priests and captains how he might betray him to them. So when you're talking about the chief priests and captains, you're essentially talking about religious leaders and police, essentially, right? So and it's going to take a conspiracy of sorts to get this done, because they're going to have to arrest him, and they're looking for a way to do it outside of the multitude, again for the fear of uprising and the lack of them not wanting to be unpopular. So, but here Judas is talking with chief priests and captains. I mean, I'm just always blown away by how often we hear about the chief priests, the scribes, the elders. Now we have the captains. I mean, there's just all the people that you would hope would be geared toward the right thing is geared toward the wrong. Yes, sir.
The captains here is probably the temple guard.
Yeah.
Not what you and I would consider the municipal police.
Right.
It's the temple guard. It's the same bunch that in John they're sent to arrest him.
Right.
And one of Brother Turner's favorite passages, their response is, they said, well, why didn't you arrest him? Nobody does what he does. And we're just not doing that.
Right.
So they're back to these guys again to try to
Yeah.
get them there instead.
Yeah, it's like I said, it took a pretty large conspiracy for this to work. Verse 5 says they were glad and agreed to give him money. Why? That's such a weird verse. Why were they glad that Judas had come to them? Yeah. Mark says they were stumped on their plan, and now we have a plan. That's kind of what I put. This makes Judas the bad guy and allows them the opportunity to make the arrest more private. I mean, you have someone that's in his inner group that can give you access to him at any given time outside of the multitude, right? So they were glad because this takes all the pressure off of them of, man, how are we going to get this done? Well, here's your solution. So it says they gave him money. And so what was that payment amount? It's not mentioned here, but we know what that is. What was the payment amount that Judas got for the betrayal? 30 pieces of silver. Is there any significance to that you know of biblically? Mark says, yeah. If you go to Exodus chapter 21, Exodus 21, verse 32. Now, this whole chapter is about the law concerning servants or slaves. But verse 32 says, If an ox gores a male or female servant, he shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So this is essentially what a slave was worth, was 30 pieces of silver. And so I don't know if that's why they chose 30 pieces of silver, but I do think that's an interesting parallel that we have in the Old Testament, 30 shekels of silver for the price of a slave. And then Mark's point on verse 6, he promised and sought opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of the multitude. Again, Judas is looking for an opportunity to do this. He made a promise to him. Again, I mean, for 30 pieces of silver, I'm going to betray the Lord. And so he's looking. He's looking for an opportunity for this to happen. Any questions or comments about that section?
It's hard to understand his motives, but given some of the other information we have in the text, Judas is the guy that believes that when the precious ointment is
Mm-hmm.
used to anoint the Savior, well, we could have sold this and given it to the poor.
Right.
But the underlying, he's the guy that held the money
Right.
for the group. And so it would appear that avarice and greed, strictly money,
Yeah.
is likely the primary motivating factor in this regard.
Yeah, I think so as well. Mark is saying that he, based on some of the things we have in the text about Judas was the guy who handled the money. He was the one who was the maddest about when they used the expensive oil. We could have sold this oil, and you're washing his feet with it instead. Likely his motive here was all about greed, which it's very likely. I mean, we're warned about greed throughout the text in several places. The love of money. And there's just a lot of warnings about greed. There's a lot of talk about the rich. It's the same difference. It's about putting something ahead of our spiritual well-being. So yeah, I think probably greed is the thing that motivated this. Any other questions or comments about that? Oh yeah. If y'all couldn't hear John, he said that choices are a big deal, and sometimes our choices have more consequences than we can realize when we're making them, and that's a fact. I mean, obviously not to this extent for us, but the choices we make can lead us down a path that's you might make one decision that takes you 15 decisions to get back to where you should have gone the first time off of the one bad choice. So we always talk to our kids. All of us parents talk to our kids about make good decisions, make good choices, know who you're hanging out with. Remember how you're raised, however you say it. The whole point is being mindful of the choices that you make, because there are repercussions sometimes, right? So yeah, that's a good point, John. We'll read verses 7 through 13 next. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. And he sent Peter and John, saying, Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat. So they said to him, Where do you want us to prepare? And he said to them, Behold, when you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him into the house which he enters. Then you shall say to the master of the house, the teacher says to you, Where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large furnished upper room. There make ready. So they went and found it just as he had said to them, and they prepared the Passover. Okay, so verse 8, he sent Peter and John to prepare the Passover. One of the commentaries that I have, made a point of saying this would have been an all-day task to prepare the Passover. That there was a lot of things that had to be done. They had to prepare and find a room, search the room for any leaven, find the lamb itself, whether you buy it or find it, take it to the temple to kill, clean, and roast, buy or prepare unleavened bread, and prepare the other items for the feast. So this is not just, hey, go do this and I'll be right there. This is an all-day task that he tasked them with. Verse 9, they ask him, where do you want us to prepare? And different accounts, I've read anywhere from 1 million to 2.6 million. There's a bunch of people in Jerusalem at this time for Passover, and so there's some concern about where can we find a room at this point. Like all the rooms might be taken, So, it's very possible they're asking, well, where are we going to, in their minds, where are we going to find a room at this point? But again, you start looking at verses 10, and this was very, we talked about a few chapters back, chapter 19, during the triumphal entry, when, again, the omniscience of the Lord is, hey, go to this next town, you're going to find a colt that no one's ever sat on. Jesus just knows and has prepares things in advance. Now, of course, he's all-knowing, but, behold, when you enter the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. I mean, it's very specific. One thing that I found interesting about this, Jesus very easily could have said, hey, go to Main Street, turn left, it's John's house, right? There was a lot of commentary about the fact that he didn't make it very clear because he already knew what Judas was going to do, and he wanted this time. It's very likely if he'd have said, hey, we're going to go to the house, number 3 on Main Street, that Judas could have used that opportunity. Hey, he's going to be here. It's a private room. It's a private house, so he could have used that. So there might have been more to it than just, being, I hate to say vague with the whereabouts of the room, but that very possibly could be so. We know Judas was seeking a way to betray him. This would have been a good opportunity to do that. So there's a lot of places in the text that we look at the omniscience of God. This is just another point of this is where it's going to be. It's very specific. You're going to find a guy carrying. It's incredible when you think about that, and it's just even more insane to me how Judas could betray God. I mean, he has firsthand knowledge. He's seen all these things happen over and over and over, and yet he's still willing to betray God for 30 pieces of silver. It blows your mind when he was there. I mean, he was in the 12. He's seen all these things. So, verse 13 says they went and found it just as he had said. And again, time and again, the disciples are seeing his power. I mean, all these things that he's saying to them, all the things that they've seen. I mean, he just keeps over and over proving. Not that he needs to keep proving, but over and over these small things. This isn't considered a miracle as far as we're concerned, but it's pretty incredible to know that, hey, into this town, follow this guy with a pitcher of water. I mean, it's incredible. Any questions or comments about that section, 7 to 13? Yes, sir.
To me, Randy, there's a very deep underlying thread here in regards to worship. This is an opportunity for these men to worship and follow God's instruction in regards to worship.
Okay.
And the making of arrangements, regardless of the circumstance. Now, providentially and perhaps even miraculously, this was arranged.
Mm-hmm.
But no obstacle. You mentioned there's a groundswell of people in Jerusalem because every male that was Jewish was supposed to go to Jerusalem
Right.
on this day.
Right.
And stay, and they would likely stay to the Pentecost 50 days later. But there's a great lesson here for us that regardless of what we view as a physical obstacle or circumstance, we're required to worship. We need to make the arrangements to worship. We need to follow his instructions in regards to worship. And he'll assist us if we'll be diligent to make sure that we do those things. He'll see to it. And we talk about, we've looked at some things even catastrophically in this building, flooding and things of that nature. But we always have the responsibility to try and make sure that worship happens somewhere for this group of believers.
Right. It's a great point. So Mark is just saying it's so important. This was about preparation to worship. Whether it was providentially, miraculously, they were prepared to worship, and it was very important to do that. And we have to have that same mindset today, that regardless of our circumstance, physical or whatever, we've got to make plans to worship when we're supposed to be worshiping. And that's a great way of looking at it. And it's so true because, guys, we all know that life happens. Things come up. It's very easy to overschedule ourselves in the world that we live in. But we need to have Sundays and Wednesdays blocked off. They just need to be known. We already have schedule. We've already got this locked in, right? But we have to plan for that because it's just real easy to not. Things happen all the time. So let's read. I think we can get through this next section, 14 through 23. Well, probably can't. There's a lot here. Um, so when the hour had come, he sat down, and the 12 apostles with him. Then he said to them, with fervent desire I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I say to you, I will no longer eat of it until it is fulfilled into the kingdom of God. Then he took the cup and gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again until the kingdom of God comes. And he took bread, gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, he also took the cup after supper, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. But behold, the hand of my betrayer is with me on the table. And truly the Son of Man goes as it has been determined, but woe to the man by whom he's betrayed. Then they began to question among themselves which of them it was who would do this thing. So, again, there's a lot of stuff here, but verse 15, and I have the New King James Version, so it says, with fervent desire, I've desired to eat this Passover. I know that the New American Standard says eagerly desired. If anyone else have a different version there? Earnestly desired. So, these are pretty big adverbs here. It's to make a point. This was very, very important to him. He's earnestly, he's got fervent desire, he's eagerly desired it. Why is that? Why do you think it was so important to him? We've kind of hit some of it already, but it goes back to, go ahead.
One, he knows the plan.
Of course. Yes, of course. He knows the plan, Mark said.
He knows the plan.
Right.
So he knows this is it.
Right.
And we'll get into that a little bit later, but it has kingdom implications, as is indicated in the next verse. But this is, when he says it's finished on the cross, he's not talking about his life.
Right.
He's talking about the plan.
Right.
Has come to fruition, and we have completed what we've been seeking to do. And so he understands that at this point, we're getting close to the plan being executed according to God's will,
Right.
perfectly, without flaw. And so I'm excited about this from the standpoint
Yes.
of it's all coming to fruition now, and it should always bring us great joy when God's will comes to fruition.
Agree. One of the words that Mark said here is that Jesus is it's so weird to hear it, but it's excited. And it's hard for us to think about that because we know what's going to come, but so did he. He knew what he was about. It even says, before I suffer. He knew what was coming, but he also knew that this was the plan. It was about to be fulfilled in its entirety. And there was excitement. He knew his purpose from the moment he got here, right? So this is just, everything's coming to fruition like it's supposed to. Verse 16 says, I will no longer eat of it. Essentially, this is just saying, I'm not going to eat a Passover. He knew this was his last earthly observance of the Passover. Verse 17, he took the cup and gave thanks and said, take this and divide it among yourself. And, when he took the cup here, this is still during the meal, the Passover meal. This is not the institution of the Lord's Supper yet. And I was reading another book that essentially was saying that there are 4 different times during the Passover where the cup would have been taken. After the opening prayer, after the first part of I think it's Halal, which is the singing, after the eating of the lamb, and then after the last part of the singing as well. So we don't know at what point he did this, but we do know that it was customary for the father of the family to offer thanks in the Passover, to be to kind of lead. And so of course we know he is the leader. They knew he was the leader. So this is just customary Passover behavior here. Verse 18, I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until, it's the same situation. It complements verse 16. He's talking about he won't drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. So those 2 verses go together. Verse 19 says he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it. Is there any special significance to him breaking the bread? Sometimes we get caught up on small little things. It's not talked about how big the pieces were or its exact amount of this. It's just a matter of that's how you have to distribute it. The bread was broken as a matter of convenience and distribution. So, we don't. Sometimes we want to put a lot of significance on certain parts of things. If you want to get into Catholicism, when they take the Lord's Supper, they believe that it turns into the body of Christ and the blood. We just get caught up in some weird things sometimes. So, verse 19. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. We talk about this all the time, obviously every Sunday, and I hate to say that it gets skimmed over because I'm hoping that it never does. But when you're talking to someone from a denomination that does the Lord's Supper semi-annually, or it's a big event coming up, let's go ahead and take the Lord's Supper, or whatever the case may be. One of their big arguments always is, well, if you take it every week, it loses its significance, it loses its meaning. Well, whose problem is that? If it loses the significance and meaning, that's an us problem, right? It never loses its significance or meaning. If we know what we're talking about, when we're talking about the Lord's Supper, how could it ever lose its significance or meaning if we have our hearts in the right place and we actually are remembering what this is? We don't dwell on it a lot because it's unpleasant to think about what Jesus actually went through for us, like the actual physical things. We talk about the sacrifice he made, and we talk, it's very high level. We appreciate the sacrifice you made on our behalf, blah, blah, which is true. But if you ever really lock into what that looks like and read the text about the things that were done to him, how can it not mean something to you every time you take it? My goodness, it's the biggest deal ever for us. So it should never lose significance. And so anytime someone says that when I'm talking to a denominational person, they say something like that, I'm always blown away. Like, how could it lose its significance? Do you remember do you know what you're taking it for? Do you know why it symbolizes those things? Anyway, didn't mean to go off on a tangent. Likewise, on verse 20, likewise he took the cup after supper. So I think it's important here that Luke says after supper, because there are some places that want to just lump this in with the Passover. At this point, the Passover meal is complete. This is after the supper. This is a separate event where he's instituting his own supper, right? This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. The blood that's shed for you. We all know about the significance of the blood when it comes to sacrifice. It's the whole text. It requires blood. Sacrifice does. Verse 21 says, "Behold, the hand of my betrayer is with me on the table." I think it's important to remember this. Judas took the supper. Judas was there. He took the supper. Judas's betrayal, in my mind, is the most baffling event in the Bible. It just is. Again, not to harp on it, but here he is. He's seen everything that Jesus has done, can do, continues to do. He knows who Jesus is, without a doubt. He's seen it, and yet he still betrays him. So, my point is, here's a guy who's spent all this time with Jesus, knows who he is, took the supper. Clearly, he didn't understand the meaning. Or maybe he did, and his heart was just hardened. Who knows, right? The point is, we later on in Corinthians it talks about examining yourself before you take the supper. There's a good reason for that. You want to make sure that we're remembering things and that your heart and your mind is in the right spot, and this is not just a throwaway box to check. Well, it's Sunday, I got to take the supper. Done. It can't be that, y'all. It cannot be that. You've got to take that time to really prepare your mind and prepare your hearts and remember what we're doing and why we're doing it. But sometimes I think it gets lost in the shuffle that Judas absolutely took the Lord's Supper and yet did all these things. Verse 21, when he says, "The hand of my betrayer is with me at the table," you can't help but imagine how Judas must have felt when he said that, right? You ever been caught? You ever been caught doing something? That horrible feeling that you get. Oh, can you imagine? Jesus knew, and Judas knew he was the one. Sometimes it's important for me to put our human emotions in these things. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Oh, of course he could. Free will never goes away. Yeah, that question was, he is part of God's plan, so could Judas have said no? He absolutely could have, right? That kind of goes back to predestination. God knows everything, but he doesn't make it all happen. He just knows what's going to happen, right? So yeah, we've always got the free will, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that does get lost sometimes in translation, going back to the hardening of Pharaoh's heart and things like that. And but no, he absolutely could have resisted. He just didn't want to at that point. Verse 22 says, "Truly the Son of Man goes as it has been determined, but woe to that man by whom he's betrayed." God's plan is going to be fulfilled. Jesus knows that. That's the whole point of him being here. The plan is going to be fulfilled, but woe to him who makes this happen. There's going to be consequences for that person, right? Just because it has to happen doesn't mean, poor Judas, I guess, for being the one who has to set it off. But again, he didn't have to set it off, but I go back to how must he have felt? He had to be feeling, man, what have I done, even at this point? And we know what happens after the fact, right? That Judas obviously had regret. But, going back to the woe to all the woes to the Pharisees and the scribes, very, very similar here. Verse 23, they began to question among themselves which of them it was who would do this thing. And I maybe I shouldn't think like that, but you have to think that Judas probably lied about it several times that night if they were questioning each other about it, right? So he's already made the betrayal, he's already done these things, and now he has to lie about it to cover his other stuff that he's done, which is kind of how lies work. So this is just a really important section. We'll pick up here next week. That way we can have time to comment and question about that, because it's a big deal. Thank you all for your participation.